Welcome to another episode of Herding Founders, the show where we explore the challenges, lessons, and stories behind building startups and scaling ideas into impactful businesses. I'm your host, Kevin, one of the co-founders of Herdr.io, a project management platform that empowers small teams to transform ideas into successful products. We're all about making project management simpler here at Herdr and more productive. But in today's episode, I'm excited to be joined by Alex, the founder of GenTex, an AI-powered Microsoft Word add-in that helps students and academics generate accurate reports quickly. Together, we'll dive into their journey of building GenTex and any of the challenges they've faced and the strategies that have helped shape their success. So let's grab your headphones, get inspired, and let's get into it. All right, so, if you can, just kind of introduce yourself and just give us an idea of what GenText is and, how you kind of came about building that.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Kevin. So, GenText is a Microsoft Word add-in, essentially AI-powered to help students and academics write research papers right within the Microsoft Word interface. So, obviously, everyone's familiar with AI. One of the issues with AI is that it hallucinates information quite often. What we do is we force the AI model to go through a database of 200 million research papers to find research citations that are accurate and then seamlessly integrated within your Microsoft Word document. That's our primary product. We have a secondary product called Mental Note that's geared towards mental health professionals. And what that helps mental health professionals do is to write clinical notes within Microsoft Word. Overall, the way we look at our business is building industry-specific vertical AI products that are focused on industry use cases. Our ultimate aim is essentially to ground AI models with industry databases and information so that, it's not making up information, and it also takes into account industry nuances while generating information.
Nice. And so what kind of led you into, what was the driving force behind, you going into AI specifically, the business models that you're kind of going after? Like, I'm sure you might have kind of dabbled in maybe other startups, or is this kind of your first kind of, business that you worked on? Like, what kind of drove you to kind of go down this path and that, as far as, going towards academic research papers?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not a developer. I'm an economist by training. I have no development experience. I now have a fairly decent understanding of developmental architecture, but I don't actually write the code. So once I saw what AI could do, right, and I guess me and the rest of the world, everyone had this chat GPT moment when it came out.
Yeah, right.
A lot of people were a bit skeptical, and at that stage, I felt unnecessarily so, where, I don't know if you remember, but people go on Reddit and go like, oh, I asked AI this really simple question, like, ours or that strawberry, and it only tells me that they're only
Right.
Jesus,
Yeah.
I would believe that AI can, write something that's semi-cogent. And you could see that there was this leaps and bounds improvement in AI technology. I just had to get involved. I was at the time working for a tech startup as a director of strategic acquisitions, but I spent the vast majority of my career as an economist writing economic research papers. So, it was almost instantaneous where I was like, if I had this 10 years back, 15 years back when I was a junior economist, this would have been gold, right? Where you're writing these research papers and it can actually find these citations that you're trudging through and trying to find information to make your argument. One of the major drivers behind me building it on Microsoft Word was that I spent so much time in the Microsoft Office suite. I was aware of the fact that you could actually build add-ins to Microsoft Office. The vast majority of the world isn't aware of this, largely just because you never actually have to do it. So once I realized that, I'm kind of like, okay, fine. I know how I'd like to deliver this product. I just need to find a person to help me do that. And that's what got me started on this route.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I hear a lot of people who start businesses and tech startups, and not everyone knows how to code, right? And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people think when you're building like a SaaS product, you have to be the one who knows how to code. But you made a good point where you just kind of have to know how to navigate the landscape. And you know, someone in your position, like how did you go about finding the particular person that you could work with to build it? A lot of get Upwork and all these other different platforms and stuff like that. What kind of was your driving force to find the right person to work with, pair with? Hopefully, they understood your particular side of the research side and also the tech side as far as building the models and things like that.
Yeah, no, great question. So I had one advantage which a lot of startup founders possibly don't, which is I had significant work experience. So I had some personal savings that I was willing to
Mhm,
put on the line. I was going to put my money where my mouth is, right? So
mhm.
it's something, well, I started the company when I was 35 years old. It may not have been possible when I was 21, right? So I recognize that difference. Um, there was also the knowledge factor in place where, you've got 15 years of experience. And, when you're 21 and you come up with a startup idea, it's usually something around social networking, dating, drinking, sort of
Right.
like in life, right? Where it's not boring stuff like, oh my God, citations are such a pain. And,
Yeah.
I spent hours doing that. So there's value in industry professionals who spend a lot of time in any particular industry, right?
Mhm.
Be an accountant, a lawyer, an engineer, or something, who spent a lot of time in it. And there's probably like a pain point that you distinctly feel that is solvable using software, but you don't actually recognize it. So it's sort of like there are these two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle where an industry professional probably knows what the problem is, but doesn't know that it's easily solvable using software. Whereas a software professional probably doesn't know this problem exists. And if someone introduces him to this problem, he kind of goes like, wait, hold on, like you can just use this open source software framework, right? And that's it. You can solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
A
Right.
good example is most things around computer vision. I think most non-technical people don't understand how good computer vision is currently, right? So they think about, these problems, and it can be something as simple as waste management, where you're like, oh, there's this stream of garbage coming through, right? And just pick out all the green bottles from that, if that's your use case. And I think a lot of non-technical people, and when I say technical in this case, I mean software technical people, don't appreciate that. So anyway, coming back to my particular case, I knew I had this problem which needed to be fixed. I had a clear idea of how I wanted it fixed, which is Microsoft Word, and I knew nothing else about like I wouldn't at that stage. This is early 2023. I wouldn't have been able to tell you the difference between front end and back end development. Right? To my
Mhm.
mind, that was just all software development. So what I did was I reached out to a company called TopTal, which focuses on high-end developers. Largely, the reason why I reached out to them as opposed to going on Upwork was I didn't trust my judgment in terms of finding a developer, right? Because I know nothing about software development, so I can't judge a person's skills. So essentially, I outsourced that to this company called TopTal. In all
you
fairness,
said
I
you said
recommend
top down.
TopTal. So T O
Oh,
P,
top.
yeah,
Okay.
TOPTAL. I'd recommend them strongly. They're quite expensive though, because they've got this vetting process, etc. So on that spectrum of, if you're looking for a cheap developer, you'll have to go to Upwork, but then you better know what you're doing. I can probably go to Upwork today because I know a lot more, but
Hmm.
at that time I couldn't. Yeah, so met this great developer. At that stage, again, right, just went in, developed the features in as much detail as I could. I used AI as well, where I described exactly what my problem was and said, hey, ChatGPT, can
Hmm. Right.
like come up with
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
features requirement that a software developer would actually understand.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it did a pretty good job of it, right? And came up with these requirements, and I sent that to the developer, and the developer came back with a, hey, I think you can totally do this. If you've got Angular on the front end, C# on the back end, blah blah blah. He was great in terms of just communicating. I think that's an important aspect that a lot of non-technical founders actually discount, which is they kind of view developers as this black box cog, which is, I send stuff to the guy and he'll just send it back.
Right. Yeah.
Opposed to, you know, what's in your mind is probably nebulous. And what you are actually looking for is a developer who can probably take this very half-assed idea. I'm not sure if I can swear on your
Oh no,
podcast.
you're good. Yeah. I'm sure all the founders have had their moments. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I want to do this thing, right? And they're like, yeah, but have you thought about any of this other stuff, right? And you probably haven't, just because you're not a technical founder. And I think there's great value in meeting a developer who can communicate. So largely it was just I got on a platform which only picks developers who are good at both communicating and good on the technical side. So got lucky that way. Had a very clear idea of, look, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And I gave myself a 6-week timeline to essentially just spit out an MVP, right? Because I'd read about it on some blog or something like that.
Yeah. Right.
Build an MVP and see if someone wants to use it.
Right.
The developer agreed and went like, yeah, you know what? Let's just do this.
Okay.
So we did it in 6 weeks, right? Built it out, and it was an add-in, got it approved on the Microsoft App Store. And the tipping point was we threw it out there, right? And I had a paying subscriber within 24 hours, and it just blew our minds. Like, it was sort of like, it was just out there, and someone found us. And at that stage, we were like, okay, this is cool. And it kept slowly building. But as you can imagine, it was an MVP, right? So it's a bit buggy, and there are people who are testing it out, etc. And I was curious enough to speak to my customers and say, hey, why do you use it? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it, etc. And that directly influenced our future software development moving forward. So anyway, that was a long-winded response to how we started.
No, you're good. Yeah, you gave good insights on round. Basically what drove you to, go after that company, and they obviously produce what you wanted. And now that you got this product, kind of, like you said, you put it out there, you got a customer within 24 hours. And after talking to maybe some of those people, what's the problem that you knew that was being solved, but are you gaining any more insights on around like why this is important for maybe college students, researchers or whatnot? Like, what's the biggest, has there been a shift in like what you had originally thought this was going to be for versus now what it's actually doing? Like any changes there?
So I think the biggest shift is actually our secondary product, which is Mental Note, right? So, and there have been tweaks in terms of our UI, UX experience, adding multiple languages, because we had lots of Latin Americans come on and ask us if we could have it in Spanish, and people in the Middle East asking if we could do it in Arabic. So we just have it now in 10 different languages. But I think the biggest fundamental switch in how conversations with customers changed how we think about the business is the mental health professionals, the Mental Note AI, which is our product for mental health professionals. What we started realizing is there were a few psychologists who were using GenText significantly. And it wasn't immediately obvious to us why they were using it, right? Because in my mind, I was sort of like, well, unless that's a researcher who happens to be a psychologist, right, and is doing both things at the same time, I can see why they're using GenTex, but otherwise I have no idea. And this started slowly building out. So I got in touch with a few of them. I mean, I tried to get in touch. One of the issues with reaching out to customers is about 90% of them don't want to talk to you, right?
Yeah.
Why the hell are you getting in touch?
You're right.
But you occasionally get lucky, and then you sometimes find some customers who constantly crib, but you kind of learn quite a bit from these guys.
Right.
You crib, right?
Exactly.
And there's value in saying, well, some of these things, look, man, I'm not going to fix them for you just because, that's such a niche case that we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
But the psychologists were interesting because one of the psychologists was just upfront, and she was like, okay, yeah, I use it to write clinical notes. And I was like, what's a clinical note? Because I'd never heard of one before. And essentially what psychologists or mental health professionals do is they have a session, right? And the session sort of like, I met Alex, and he's got the startup and he's quite stressed and there's a lot of anxiety. He's not sleeping too well, but he's euphoric, etc. And what they've got is roughly these rough notes, and then they've got to write these clinical notes, which come in very specific formats. So one of the most common formats is something called the SOAP format. So that's Statement, Objective, Assessment, Plan. So that way, you can just track the patient's progress through multiple sessions and multiple providers. See, it's a
Mm-hmm.
multi-year process, etc. So now this is one of those. This falls in the domain of documentation's a bitch for anyone, right? Like everyone hates doc,
Right. Yeah.
regardless of it. Software developers hate documentation. Guess what? So do psychologists, so do engineers. Everyone hates documentation, right?
Right.
So it, we realized we were like, but my reaction to that is, but this isn't like fine tuned for your use case. Like this
Yeah.
I'm not even sure we're coming up with this, and I was a bit hesitant. And she just like waved me off with, I make it work. Like I was like, you make it, So I came out of that meeting going like, this must be this massive pain point for some woman to just come in and go, I'm going to use this product, even though it's not built for me. And, but it still like solves 50% of my problem. And then I'll work around it, right? And make it work. And we're like, okay, fine. You know what? There's probably value in this. And we went back. We did a lot more research on it. We found a database of, public domain clinical notes, which has all personal details scrubbed off. So, Alex's name isn't there,
Yeah.
his
Right.
age is there, but it's like in a range, etc. But then you've
Mm-hmm.
got all your classic symptoms and the assessment plans, etc. And we trained an AI model on that, right? So we fine-tuned model on that. Again, surprisingly easy. Once you've got the hard bit is getting the data and cleaning the data. But once you've got the data, it takes 2 days to fine-tune a model.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
you're off to the races, right? Because then you've got this fine-tuned model and you can totally just... And then we had all of GenTex front-end and back-end architecture, right? So it's essentially just plugging in a new model into it
Yeah.
and
Right.
saying, here's a new use case. And that's going pretty well as well. So, GenTex is still bigger, but mental notes growing faster than GenTex. And the truth is, without GenTex, I would not have known about mental notes. Because I've never
Right.
psychologist. So that's probably the most significant uh, example I can think of, which is, customer discussions have actually significantly changed our route. And that influenced our we're planning on launching a legal add-in the future, connecting to all of US case law. So we've already started building out a vector database for it. Hopefully in the future, we'll move across industry, right? Ideally, we'd like to be the guys who develop plugins across, architecture, engineering, law, medicine, etc.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, and I get like like kind of to a point there you were just mentioning, uh as you're building out the AI is booming obviously, right? Everything's wanting a model, or every company's wanting it. What's like the toughest challenge you face, maybe as an entrepreneur, either building this, has there been anything that you've overcome as far as like before, I guess you can say, like navigating the AI space, right? Like, is there like a maybe like in that space too much going on? Like, do you feel like you're in a position to grow and continue to explode as more companies use AI, more people continue to use it? What's your kind of thoughts around that?
So great point, right? And you've hit the nail on the head. One of the biggest issues is competition, obviously, because the barriers to entry have come down so low that there's so
Hmm.
many competitors in the market. Differentiating yourself in that market is complicated. I personally feel that it makes more sense to like niche down as much as possible,
Hmm.
because then you can't be all things to all people. That's what the big AI companies are, right? So it's
Right.
ChatGPT or Anthropic's
Jasper and all
Claude,
this.
Jasper. So
Yeah, yeah.
actually is a very good example of it, right? Where they're big, but they can't grow any further just because and growth is kind of slowed down
Hmm.
because they're so big that they can't niche down, right? Unless they figure out
Exactly.
niching
Yeah,
down,
right.
right?
Right.
I think there's value, and so our plan essentially is to stay small, nimble, right? I don't think the plan is to accelerate growth as fast as possible and, burn a lot of runway. We'll be focusing on efficient growth. That's why we've raised funds from Tiny Seed, which is an accelerator geared purely at software companies trying to build sustainable businesses as opposed to,
Right.
go big or go broke. So that's the way we think about that aspect of the business. The flip side of
What's that?
this is obviously customer acquisition is one of the biggest challenges, right? So I'm fairly confident, for example, if I had this magic wand where I put GenText in front of every single person who uses Microsoft Word every day, we'd be huge, right? We'd have this great. But in this crowded space, right, just getting your name out there and getting people to try it out because we've got, and I won't claim to be like, the solution for everyone. But there is a certain subsection of users who just love us, right? Because it just fits their workflow perfectly. It's sort of like, I don't have to get out of Microsoft Word. I can work through a 100-page document. You can tell me exactly where everything is within this 100-page document. That's amazing, right? For other people who don't spend that much time in documents, I can see how it's sort of like, that's a bit of overkill. So ideally, it's just getting us in front of all the people who might get immense value from us is the big challenge, right? And that's what we spend most of our time with right now. Essentially, it is either product development, where we're developing these new products for new users, or it is, okay, now we've developed this product for this user. How do we get it out in front of a user where they actually try it out and go like, hey, you know what? I really like this. I prefer using this to a generic chatbot. And I want to
Right,
use it.
right. And so you touched on a point with the tiny seed investment, and there's a lot of founders who, but kind of like how you mentioned, you were able to kind of fund it earlier on yourself. But then on the investment side, what was kind of your reason for going with an investment? Like, was it because you were seeing traction and growth, and you needed additional insights, mentorship? Like, for anyone out there that's maybe looking to go that VC route, when did it kind of make sense for you in your company?
Right. So 2 points, 2 parts to this. One is, of course, acceleration, when you just put more fuel to the fire when you see traction. So I don't think I personally would have done it. And I talked about this earlier where, I gave myself 6 weeks to build this and throw it out there and see if anyone wanted to use it. And if people didn't want to use it, I wasn't going to pursue it any further, right? But once I saw that, I was sort of like, okay, fine, probably need a bit more capital to put fuel to the fire and grow this and scale this. Having said that, I like the analogy of, putting jet fuel in a Toyota Yaris, right? Where it's sort of, if you put the wrong kind of fuel in, you blow your enterprise up. And
Right,
so now I'm not saying, and this really depends on business models. It depends on risk appetites, depends on the individual running this, right? So it venture capital funding makes sense for some people. For me, I sort of required, and I still think it's sort of the bare minimum to get us to sustainable profitability and growth, right? And what I mean by that is not just profitability, but enough profitability where we can reinvest in the business and keep growing the business at a fast
right,
pace. So Tiny Seeds mandate essentially just is identical to this, where it fits that profile of, because one thing which most startup founders don't really realize, especially if you're younger, is that the VC model um, is essentially predicated on the fact that one of their startup portfolio companies will become at least a unicorn, if not more. And we could talk about the dynamics of that
yeah,
really long time. I would recommend a book called Venture Deals by
okay,
Brad Feld, right? So it's a detailed analysis, and I think every founder should read it. It was eye-opening, right, in terms of what a VC is looking for and what makes sense for them, what doesn't make sense for them.
okay,
And not every founder necessarily wants to go down that route. I definitely didn't. So I needed some capital to get us off to profitability, but I'm not really interested in like burning through massive amounts of capital to be, the next big AI company that solves everything for everyone, right? I think
right, right.
there's this space for vertical AI, and that's where we like to focus.
So as you kind of navigate some of the different space or things with Gentex, what's has there been like a mistake that you kind of maybe made earlier on, or even like in your entrepreneur journey, like whether it be like finding a business, like maybe Gentex wasn't your first foray into entrepreneurship. What's a mistake that maybe you made that you kind of either look back on and it kind of helped you get to where you're at kind of now, or
Right.
how you
Oh,
kind of?
well, Gentex is my first business.
Oh, okay.
In terms of just the the truth is there are many errors that happen all the time, right? And in some cases, it's not even very clear if it's an error. It's sort of like, that probably didn't work out as much as I
Yeah,
it
yeah,
to, right? One thing I can think of, which was a development failure, essentially, very early on, right? But that's the MVP buggy stage, which is where we had multiple users have login issues. Something very fundamental that you think would be very simple, which is the single sign-on with Google and Microsoft,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And this, which it can get quite messy with the backend, right? And especially on different devices, etc. I didn't quite appreciate that as a non-tech founder, and
Yeah.
it got quite a bit of grief for like a good 2 to 3 weeks. We had a fair amount of churn as a result, where people were frustrated about, oh, I've got this product, but I can't log in, or I log in
Hmm.
inconsistently, etc. But excuse me. Having said that, the vast majority of these mistakes are fixable and they're reversible, right? So you can probably just update and have a new feature out there. And if it doesn't work, you probably roll it back. So
Right,
it's
right.
not the end of the line. I think the biggest mistake, which we haven't really done to a large extent, but I see a lot of other founders tend to do it, is analysis paralysis, right? You try to analyze everything as opposed to just throw something out there and see if it sticks. Um, One of the issues with that, at least in my experience, is that if there's no way to have 100% perfect information, um, and if you keep analyzing, that's essentially what you're looking for, right? You're looking for 100%
Yeah.
information, and if you don't actually take that risk, you lose out on the opportunity of serendipity, which in my case was these psychologists finding me and using it for something that I had no idea even existed, right? So there is value in testing something out, throwing it out there, and seeing if it works. Um, but
Okay.
again, right? With mistakes, it's one of those things where ask me in 2 years, and maybe
Yeah.
I'll like, everything I told you about this is all
You're
crap,
right.
and I was making a huge mistake while I was talking to you about it. So it's just
So,
my experience.
yeah, yeah. So, I'm sure with being like an entrepreneur, your time is kind of everything. And what's some kind of habits and things that you do to kind of keep yourself grounded? I'm sure you got family or friends or kind of things that might take your mind outside of growing a business. Like, what's some kind of routines you kind of keep for yourself, kind of make sure you're doing the right things?
It's a great question, and to be honest with you, I actually struggle with this. Right, I struggle with the balance. Honestly, because so for some background, I've got a young child, right? So he's
Hmm.
3, and as anyone with young children will know, they're very high energy, very intense.
Yeah,
Have a lot
yeah.
of time. So it's sort of like, at least I personally constantly feel I'm not doing enough on all fronts, right? I'm not spending enough time with my kids or my wife, but I'm not spending enough time with my parents.
Mhm.
But while I'm spending time with them, I'm sort of like, oh, I'm not spending enough time on my business or work.
Right.
You know, they, I wish I could say, hey, I do these, I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and do a cold plunge. And, that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He always here. Yeah.
usually it is, I'm woken up at 4 a.m. by a crying child who's like,
Right.
that's
That's
quite
it.
irate, and then,
Yeah.
and that kind of like, I wake up a bit
I mean,
groggy,
that's good. That's good
worked up.
because you know what? I think sometimes in like the industry, like you get the influencers, right? They're always like, I wake up at 4 and I go work out for 2 hours and then I do that. Like, but it's like it's good hearing realistically. Like you saying, like you have kids, you have family, and like there's good to have balance. Like I have 3 kids myself, and obviously I'm taking time out now to
obviously you're taking time out now to speak with me, and sometimes that time's valuable. So makes real good, makes sense.
Yeah. So right, and you've got 3 kids, so it's like you
yeah,
than I do, right? It's one of those things where you try to do the best you can, and very often I feel like I'm afraid at both ends. AI is actually amazing to help with this, where essentially what I now try to do is try to reduce my cognitive load, if that makes sense, in decision.
right.
So say I'm at the crossroad, right, in terms of, oh, what decision should I take, right? Should I try this marketing approach? Should I do cold emailing? Should I, focus on ad spend? Should I do this, that? And now what I do is essentially I ask AI for its advice. And I've started delegating a lot of this to AI, where it's sort of like, look, here's the information I have. This is what I'm struggling. What are the pros and cons, right? And then it helps you clarify that very quickly, I might say, right? I don't have to like pick up the phone and call my friend Kevin and see if he's free and in the mind space, helping me talk through this. Just this with the AI model, and then the AI model comes back, and then I go, well, I was thinking about it. Now that you've responded this way, I'd like to change that idea. And that's great because it helps you clarify your thought process significantly quickly compared to any other way of doing it. And then at that stage, I essentially very often just tell the AI model, okay, but given everything,
right.
You're in this situation, and they'd be like, oh, I don't know, spend more time calling email, spend more time with the child, something like that, right? And they'll go,
right.
You know what? Thanks for making that decision for me. On the flip end, I think we can do this because we've actually made decisions before, so we kind of know, like the quality of the decision making, and we can go like, that does make sense. I'm not so sure what that says for our children, right? Doesn't know how to add.
Right,
Now, someone asked him what's 3+2. Why wouldn't he go to an AI model? And at that stage, you're kind of like, okay, this might because it exists, but then what does that do for their development, etc.?
Their development, right?
But that's a non-starter question, right? That's a
the
answer is to that.
No, it's good. Yeah. I mean, so, anyone that's, probably listening, I'm sure there's, people thinking about doing a startup and bootstrapping. Like what's one piece of advice you would give to anyone that's, looking to just jump into the foray and, start, looking into a business or something? I know one of the things you kind of touched on earlier was you were economic, you did research papers and stuff like that. And I think sometimes people try to navigate out of areas that they're not maybe familiar with. Like what's some advice you would give someone looking for?
So the one advice I'd give, and honestly, I wish I'd just done this earlier, right? Like in my 20s. And I spent a lot of time in corporate environments, right? And there's this sense of fear that you don't know what you don't know, and will I even be able to do this? Right. To a large extent, what I underestimated was the amount of help I was going to get. So I touched upon this earlier where I said I didn't know what the difference was between front-end development and back-end development when I had this idea, right? But it was amazing how many people were willing to help me out if I had that question. Like no one's ever treated me like, oh, that was a stupid question. Why would you ever ask that? I think a lot of the fears in our heads where we're worried that we seem stupid to people, or we'd sound stupid or say something stupid. But turns out most people are kind and nice, and if you reach out to them and say, hey, I think you can help me out, and I've got this question, can you help me out? Some people may not respond, but that's not so much, in my experience, it's not because they don't want to respond. It's probably because they have a child who's just woken them up 4 a.m. It's just tired, right? They just haven't heard of you. They won't get around. But most people actually are very helpful. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that support and help. Because you think that, you're all on your own, which is true to some extent, but you're also not, right? If you need the advice and you need help, people are willing to help out.
That's good. Yeah. And, as we get close to the end here, what's kind of next for, GenText or your projects or whatever's on the horizon? Like, what's your kind of goals as far as your next step in entrepreneurship, like for the business, for yourself?
So,
Kind
for now, we're having a lot of fun just with the business, right? I
of.
plan on keeping this as lean as possible.
Okay.
Got this internal metric in my head in terms of revenue per employee, which is so
Yeah. Yeah.
really simple. And you go, okay, fine, let's try to grow this as much as possible. With the idea that we'll take a decision at that stage, right? There's some natural possibilities with a startup, especially if it's profitable, right? You can either exit it or you could run this as a business, which, you use to finance other businesses and, go in for bigger and bigger plays.
Mhm.
Um, there've been all permutations and combinations of this that have been done. To be honest, right now, we're just not there yet. So it's hard to say. So at this stage, it's essentially get it up to a scale where those options become available to us, right? Where
Right.
it's either, oh, we're big enough and now we can go acquire another company, which is complementary to us, and then, grow that business because of everything that we've learned in terms of marketing a product and grow the
Hmm.
business further. That's one option. The other option is be the company that sells to another company,
Yeah.
which also the same thing. So, but
Right.
that all of that's much later on in our stage. It'll take us a few years to get there.
Okay, so where can kind of people follow you in your journey? You on social media? I know you got gentext.ai. Is that correct?
Gentext.ai, that's our website. The Microsoft App Store is
Oh,
great.
okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's a store that most people don't know about. And it's an app marketplace, kind of like your iOS Google Play Store.
Hmm.
We're on the App Store. We're one of the most downloaded products on the store. But there are other add-ins as well, which help you out. Like there's a YouTube add-in, that other add-ins from Dropbox, etc., just to help you with your workflows. So if actually more than Gentex, if I could get people on the Microsoft App Store, right, and just get them to
Yeah. No. Right. Yeah. Just get them there.
just get them there, because once they're there, I know that they'll find value, if not through Gentext or Mental Note, they'll find value through the other products, right, in their workflow. But that's where they can find us. We have a Twitter account, Gentext AI. I should probably be doing a lot more on social media, but I don't. Right, so
Okay.
that's one of the other things on my list of things to do in terms of just driving engagement. But
Gotcha.
yeah, that's where you find us.
Okay. Well, yeah, Alex, I appreciate, coming on today and just kind of giving some insights on your journey. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening will probably get some good, information that they can possibly, hopefully use in their, business startup. Again, thanks for coming on today.
Cool, and thanks for the invite, Kevin. It's been a pleasure. A lot of fun.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Herding Founders. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights to apply to your own entrepreneurial journey. If you found this episode inspiring, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a fellow founder or entrepreneur. Your support helps us continue to bring these stories to life. And if you're looking for a smart way to manage your projects and turn your ideas into reality, check out Herdr.io. That's HERDR.io, the project management platform built for small teams with big dreams. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Herding Founders. Until then, keep building, keep growing, and keep chasing those dreams.